Okay guys, how's it going? It's a Sunday morning here in the UK and I am having a mess around with some new software, a new toy that I've picked up. This is DATS system by Dayton. So it's software and it comes with a little adapter with some crocodile clips, and what this is a TS parameter reader. You just hook up any woofer and it tells you the TS parameters of that woofer. Really clever bit of software. Now I'm not going to go into great detail about TS parameters on this video, that's going to be a separate video, but because this software can measure resonant frequency, cues, VAS, etc., and give you a really good idea of what the woofer is capable of and what box is best suited to, I thought it'd be super fun for some of you guys who have watched my videos for years and years and years to dig out lots of old woofers that I've got here, all stuff that you've seen if you subscribe to my channel, and see what they're coming up as on the software, what boxes they're best suited to, how the FS is shifted over time compared to manufacturer's ratings, etc. So just briefly going through them, this is the 18-inch Celestion PA driver, which was originally in Wembley Stadium in the UK. This is old now, this has seen better days, it's tired, I've had to make repairs on the spider a couple of times, and the glue's come away. I'm pretty sure that it's slightly sunken down, it seems to move out more than it moves in, so it's probably not really best suited to any application these days, but I want to see what the software makes of it, and also I'd love to get an idea of what the TS parameters are like. I want to see if it's got a low or high Q. I want to see what the FS is round about. I'm guessing 38, something like that. So I'm just going to hook that up and see what that comes up as. I've got the Pioneer, which is probably one of the first car subs that I owned. Now these are pretty good, they're cheap and they're cheaply built, but it absolutely drops balls in my home theatre system, regularly reaching X-mech limit. So the spider is only single layer. I've had to make a couple of repairs recently. It's got a couple of rips in there, which is understandable. It's only a cheap single layer spider and I'm making it move like crazy daily, but I'm very impressed with how it sounds. It's a good musical woofer. I'm expecting this to have a nice low FS, where I've been using it for years, driving it to the limits. It's probably loosened up quite a bit more since the manufacturer specs on that. So yeah, interested to see where that's sitting at now. I have got the Xplod. Now this is one probably of the most impressive woofers actually that I've got. Yeah, they're cheap, they're crap, they're built very cheaply or whatever, but this thing just will not give up. I have clamped 2000 watts, actually clamped on the screen from an amplifier, for a number of burps and sort of tones and all sorts of stuff through this coil. Now this is a 350 watt RMS rated coil, and it stinks out the room and it just keeps going, it just does not stop. So I'm going to see what the TS parameters are like of this compared to the manufacturer's specs, because obviously it's quite loose now, the amount of abuse I've given this, if you've seen my videos. Now I just want to show you something quickly on this woofer, which I was very impressed about. And obviously these grills, usually from the manufacturer, are sort of all covered up here, so I pushed a few of them in. And I'm just going to switch to another shot here of the coil. Now look at that coil, it's a flat wound coil, and I've seen all sorts of coils, cheap China coils, decent USA coils. I've seen there's a whole variety of different quality voice coils and different power ratings. Now that to me does not look like a 350 watt coil. That is nice build quality in there. It's blackened at the bottom where I've given it so much abuse, but it's not bulged out, it's not grown in size, it's not come away from the former. It just keeps going and going, and this still reads at 4 ohms and it still plays perfectly as it should do. I am very impressed. Guys, you can pick these up for, like, in the UK, 10, 15, 20 pounds on eBay, probably similar money in the US. They're all over the place because they're mass produced, but they're actually capable of dropping and taking good amounts of abuse. So a really good budget option there, guys. Now this is the MS, which I am very grateful to Jerry for sending me over. This is a 10-inch home theatre woofer. I've no idea the TS parameters of this, but it has been used quite well. So I'm just be interested to see what the TS parameters are showing up for that. It was part of a integrated kind of box plate amplifier, so I don't know if the TS parameters will be available online, so I'd like to check it out. Now this is one of the legendary Bear Vids 8-inch woofers from back in the day. I've done countless videos of these. This is one of the original ones that I got, one of the original pair, and obviously these were like a big question mark as to what they were, where did they come from, what were they originally designed for. I've since found out that these are made by a company called Linn. Now Linn are very highly regarded in hi-fi, home audio, good brand actually, and these were actually OEM factory subwoofers for Aston Martin vehicles. Really weird. Obviously there was a bunch of stock, and I got these for £7.50 each. I've since seen them on eBay for £200 each, so I got an absolute bargain on these. They're very good, and that explains why they're so good. They're made by a good manufacturer, dual voice coil, so obviously no TS parameters anywhere on the web for these, so I'll be interested to see what the FS is and how useful they are for being a subwoofer application. They're very well used now. The FS is very soft, as you know. I've used these for years and years and years, only recently swapping out my T-line bottom mids there for some Kef woofers, which are actually better suited in there. This one does need a little bit of spider work. It's got a little bit of a rip on the spider. It's making a similar clicking sound to my old JVC. But a bit of DD glue will sort that right out. I have this old JBL 6 inches, was from the Bandpass 4th order home cinema subwoofer. It's a bit of a shit woofer, but you know, I got it, I still got it. It'll just be interested to see what the TS parameters are like for that for showing up. And last but not least, the original Goodman's 3-inch woofer here. This is probably the first dedicated bass driver I ever owned. It's seen better days. It's got the dust cap pushed in there, someone pushed it in, but it still works, and I don't throw anything away, so I kept this for sentimental value really. This is like from the very first videos I've got on YouTube is of this little woofer, back when I was like in my very early teens and I was just getting into bass, and I was like, oh yeah, this little thing can make some noise. To be fair, it did make some noise, but you know, it's a tweeter these days. What are you saying? DDZ sitting over there, so. But anyway, so I'm going to plug this in, and just for fun and games, just see what the TS parameters are like, and maybe draft up a perfect box for it, maybe a tapped horn, see what we can get out of it. So without further ado, I am going to start with the smallest and the first woofer that I ever owned. I'm going to hook it up to the DATS system, and we're going to see what the TS parameters are like, and I'll show you how this software works. On the software here, it's very simple. All we do is hit the button which says measure free air parameters, and it will play a sine sweep from 1 Hz to 20 kHz. Have a listen. There we go. And now we have a graph output of the phase and the impedance. So obviously both of those will change as the woofer plays through the range of frequencies from 1 Hz to 20 kHz, and from that we can get a whole bunch of parameters over here. Now let's focus this a little bit better. So we have an FS resonant frequency of 116 Hz, which is not really in the subwoofer territory. So a mid-bass woofer there. Obviously it's an 8 ohm driver. The RE there is sitting at 7.2, it's about right. Now the QTS, QES and QMS. So Q is what the coil has to work against. So obviously the coil is moving in the magnetic gap. It has two forces which it works against. It works against the woofer's suspension system, so the spider and the surround, which is going to be QMS, which is mechanical, M for mechanical, and QES, which is electrical. So you have a total Q of 0.7, which is pretty high, QES electrical of 1.1, which is skyrocketing high, and a QMS mechanical of 2.87, which is quite low. So from those values we can get the FS, and also we can calculate the VAS. That is done by adding a known mass, so a known weight, to the cone and testing it again. And what it does is it compares the results it got from these figures to the ones with the added known mass, and from that you can calculate how much air it's going to be able to move. Basically it's a little bit more complicated, but I'll go into more detail in another video about that. Okay, so pretty interesting stuff. Let's try the 6-inch JBL. I'm going to imagine this has got a low FS and a pretty low QMS as well. So let's hit the free air measurement button, play the sweep. Yep, so it's all shifted down, so the FS will be obviously much lower than that previous woofer. FS is sitting around about 53 Hz, so it's a little bit higher than I envisioned, but it is a small woofer. Obviously the smaller and lighter the cone, then the higher the FS is generally going to be, similar to a drum skin. QTS is 0.5, pretty average, 0.7 on the QES, and 2 on the QMS. Okay, now this is, I've only just got this software, and so I'm still sort of getting used to and sort of knowing what's high and what's low for all these values. I'm going to do a nice video on TS parameters shortly, so it'll explain in a little bit more detail, but for me this is just kind of interesting, and anyone else who knows about TS parameters and stuff and who's seen my videos for years and years and who's, you know, expanding their audio knowledge, this might be quite interesting to see how all my different woofers have performed over the years, and seeing what they're actually coming out as on some specs here. Okay, maybe one of the ones that I'm most interested about. This is the Lin, I can say that now, 8-inch woofer. So I'm going to guess this has got a relatively high-ish FS for a 8-inch driver. It doesn't feel very loose and bouncy, so I'm going to say it's going to have a relatively high QMS as well. Let's have a look what we got over here. So we got 3.7 on the impedance there, that's about right. The FS, yeah, 62, so it's a little bit higher than the JBL 6 there. So in terms of bass performance, a nice musical woofer. These did drop quite nicely, I gave them quite a bit of power. The QTS there, 0.6, that's not too bad. And then the QMS, yeah, it's quite a bit higher than the other woofers I've tested there, 3.2. So okay, my sort of guesses are getting better and getting more correct as to what the woofer is going to be doing on the spec sheet here. I'll calculate VAS in a little bit later and work out perfect boxes for these, and I'll put the dimensions of my old boxes that I made, DL ported back in the day, and I'll just use the RE box calculator, and I'll see how they come out on the graphs, and see basically what they were doing and if I could have built them any better. Got the MS hooked up next, and this has got a reasonably good motor on there. It's got an additional ring on the bottom there, which has been put on after by MS, so I imagine this has probably got a slightly higher QES, as there's a bit more motor force there for it to work against. So it's through here. Let's have a look. Okay, so on this the graph has changed quite a bit. They can see the phase is less extensive, it doesn't go out of phase quite as much as the other drivers. Let's have a look. We have 3.3 ohms. This is actually a 4 ohm woofer, but the resistance there nice and low, getting the most out of the amplifier. We have 37 Hz FS, which is nice for music, is good there. So we have QTS 0.4, QES of 0.5, and a QMS of 1.4, so that's a nice low QMS. So the mechanics on the woofer there are not too stiff to push through for the coil. QES, is that high or is that low? I'm not too sure really. I haven't done enough woofers to compare, but no, that's looking pretty nice actually in terms of a set of TS parameters. And like I say, the phase response is nice, it doesn't go too out of phase either, so it'll be a nice accurate musical woofer. Good SQ on this, which as I expected, it's a very nice woofer. Now the Sony Xplod. What kind of FS are we going to be looking at here? Just before I hit the button, the standard FS, standard parameters on this is the 12.1p, so this is the FS as standard is already quite low, 26.4. QTS is 0.4, QMS is quite a bit higher at 5.8. I imagine, I'm going to guess, I'm still sort of getting used to this, I imagine the QMS is going to be a bit lower and the FS is going to be a bit lower. QES should be a bit similar, I'm not too sure. QTS will change, so let's have a quick look and see what it actually comes out as. Okay, so not quite as nice quality woofer as the MS there, it goes out phase quite a bit more, and also quite a bit more impedance rise on there. Let's have a look. The FS is, yeah, a couple of hertz lower, 24 hertz. Not drastically different to be honest, which is quite impressive with the amount of abuse I've given this. So it's staying relatively, you know, close to its manufacturer's ratings despite how old this is and how much abuse it's had. Now the QMS I said was going to be lower, 2.8. What was the original file or something, wasn't it? QMS, yeah, 5. So the mechanical resistance has dropped considerably, which is what I predicted on that, because it's softened up and it's, you know, is obviously older. And the QES I said would stay about the same, which is 0.5. What was that on the manufacturers? QES, that was a 0.4. So yeah, stayed sort of about the same. I don't know whether the softened spider will have a difference on the QES there as electrical, but that's roughly what I guessed it would be there. The RE's 3.1 for 4-ohm woofer, that's about right. So actually perfectly usable still. Coil's in good condition even though it's blackened, and it stinks out the room before. So yeah, perfectly usable woofer. Okay, so the Pioneer TSW121 SPL, similarly to the Sony, I imagine this is probably going to have a lower FS than the original manufacturer's ratings. QMS, it's difficult to say. Like I say, I'm still learning about the TS parameters and getting an idea and a good way of guessing what they might be. So far, let's have a look at the manufacturer's ratings for this. This is all I could find on a forum. Original FS would be about 30. QMS very high compared to these woofers I've been testing, 15.97. QTS total is low. Okay, so let's have a quick look and see what it comes out at on the software here. Okay, so looking at this, we have a very high impedance rise. So at FS, I've got this wired in series to 8 ohms. Now let's have a quick look at this. So this jumps up to 164 ohms free air at the resonant frequency there. Pretty mad stuff. The phase goes out of phase as well, quite a bit there, free air. Let's have a look. About 66 degrees out of phase, and on the downside, yeah, about similar, 66 degrees out of phase. So not particularly impressive there. However, as you noticed from the videos, it does drop nicely. We have RE of 6.1 ohms, so that is a bit low considering it's wired to 8 ohms, but that's not a bad thing. FS, yeah, is about 4 hertz lower than the manufacturer rating, so that is 26.24 hertz. QMS is 8.2, so a lot lower than what the manufacturer was saying on that other page there. QTS is still nice and low. It's shot down a bit at 0.30, so perfectly usable woofer. I'm still obviously learning. I've only just picked up this software, so obviously I want to know a little bit more about the phase here and the impedance rise and whether that's a good or a bad thing. So let me know what you guys think as well, whether that's a good or a bad thing to have a high phase shift there and also a very high impedance rise at FS. Now the old 18-inch Celestion. The software is probably going to look at this and be like, what the hell is this? Okay, let's check it out and see what it comes up as. Oh, nice and efficient. That was definitely the loudest sweep out of all the woofers I've used. PA woofer. It's very efficient there. Nice sensitivity. Okay, let's have a quick look. So the FS is around the 35 hertz mark. Not too bad. QTS overall is nice and low. QES nice and low. QMS nice and low. Okay, interesting stuff. Okay, I've hooked up the 8-inch Lin once more, and I'm gonna have a play around with the VAS, and I'm gonna try and export the values and whack it into BB6 and try and design a perfect ideal ported enclosure for a single or maybe dual one of these. So what I've done is I've measured the standard TS parameters again here. We've got the FS sitting there at 61 hertz, about right where it was before. Now the way we can measure the VAS is by adding a known mass to the cone to decrease the FS, and by doing that it can then work out the mass of the soft parts and the mass of the soft parts plus the air load, and from that it can work out the VAS. So in order to add some mass to the cone, I've got some blue tack, not ideal, but basically that will sort of stick to the cone a little bit, stop it vibrating when it does the little low level sweep there. So I just need to go over to some scales over here, a bit messy, I know, and I need to weigh the exact mass of the blue tack, 37 grams. So I'm going to take this back over here, and I just need to add the mass to the cone of the woofer. Sort of like squish it a little bit there so it sticks a little bit to the cap. And so now when I run the VAS test, the FS will be considerably lower as it's got a heavier cone. So all I need to do is add in the measurements here. So that was 37 grams. And the piston diameter of this woofer, piston is the cone diameter plus a quarter of the surround each side, or 6.25 inches. And so I hit measure VAS, add mass, and it has now worked out the VAS. So the grams, the weight of the soft parts is 27 grams, about right, and the VAS here is 0.46. So from all of these values, I can now export them, go File, Export Impedance Data as a Clio formatted, and I'm going to export this as Lin 8. Save that. Now I can go up over here to BB6 Pro, imports the data, and go for the one I just made. Now annoyingly, these are all series, so I've got to go and move all these over from individual to series. Bear with me. Okay, so the values are all entered correctly from what the DATS system have read. So this is exactly the parameters of my 8-inch woofer. As you can see, BB6 is happy with all the values, lights up green. That shows that it's happy with how they're all rating with each other. So just going to go ahead and calculate the missing ones. The RMS here, which isn't the RMS like you'd normally think. This is a mechanical resistance of suspension losses, so I can go ahead and calculate that. I can calculate the SD, which is the cone area basically, and the X-max I can only really find out by measuring the coil and the former. It's not something you can really find by doing low line level sort of tests like this, so I don't actually know what the X-max of this woofer is. If I were to make a guess, I've got to probably say somewhere between, I don't know, 6 and 9 mils. You know, it's only a small woofer. It's not going to be moving a great deal, so I don't know, let's just for argument's sake put in 8 mils of X-max. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that will only really be affecting the VD and the display, the sort of cone displacement graphs on this. So X-mech, it works out at being about 12 mils. It just does a sort of percentage increase on that, and the VD, which is the displacement volume at X-max, it works out also in litres there. Let's get an estimate of the nominal impedance, which is 4.32 ohms. That's about right. The PE, which is the power, this was about, what was this, 200 watts RMS I think these woofers were, and we've got a dB reading there, so it's not a particularly sensitive woofer. I knew that. It's a sort of car application subwoofer, not a PA style. We can estimate the value then of a 2.8 volt SPL sensitivity. So we have now a complete set of parameters on BB6 for this woofer. So a woofer that I knew absolutely nothing about, I now know absolutely everything about, all its characteristics, how it's going to act in different boxes. BB6 gives you a rough idea of whether this woofer would work best in a closed or vented enclosure. For this woofer, it's somewhere in the middle. It's like, yeah, it'll work fine in both types of enclosure. So I'm just going to go ahead, let's make this a single driver box. The sort of dimension, I can work out the dimensions to get a rough idea of the cubic foot displacement. It's a tiny woofer. It's going to be like 0.05 cubic foot of displacement, so I'm just going to whack that in there. Not going to make much difference. So this is the response curve that it gives for the woofer based on its TS parameters. So as you can see there, this gives you a very basic output there. Now I'll get, obviously that is just from the TS parameters of the woofer free air, its response, and these are some external crossovers if you want to do that, so let's not bother with that. Let's accept these parameters. Now let's go to the box dialog. Now you can either design your own box or you can get it to suggest a perfect box. I don't particularly like the boxes that it suggests for perfect. They tend to be very flat, but they don't tend to drop very well. But let's let it suggest a perfect box for this 8-inch woofer. I'm going to go for vented, and let's just check. We're not going to have any dampening in there. Vents, we're going to go for one round vent. I like my aero ports. Interior, we're going to have it, flush mount, I like that. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, that's all looking about right. So let's get it to suggest a perfect box. We want to go for high output. We've got a choice of high output, high fidelity, extended bass, or a desired F3, which is the sort of start the roll off. So let's go for high output to start with. So this is going to be high SPL, not particularly great lows. Okay, so we have a box tuning of 70 Hz, so a mid bass kind of range, with the F3 when it starts to roll off at 61 Hz. Okay, pretty good for the mid bass. Obviously got no dampening in there, so let's plot this on a graph and see what we've got. So nice sort of peaky response there, generally between the sort of 60 and 110 Hertz mark there. If we go down here, we can have a look at the cone displacement. So when I'm putting 200 watts into this woofer, if I play under 50 Hertz in this box, it will start to bottom out, or it will go past the X max. So that's when it will start to, you know, become non-linear. So this box isn't very good for dropping them lows, but it would be a nice mid-range, mid-bass kick, kind of really punching your chest bass. Vent velocity is pretty non-existent actually. Is that because I haven't added in any? Let's have a quick look at vents. I haven't added in the vent diameter actually here, so I need to go ahead and do that. Let's do a 3-inch port, and it works out the length for me there. So you can see how that affects the graph. Let's go back and replot this graph. It's a little bit different. I've added some of the port resonances on there as well, so you can see where the port starts to resonate a little bit there. So now if I go down to vent velocity, you can see the velocity of the air from the vent, and you can see the phasing and group delay, etc. So let's compare this now, change the colour of the graph, to what BB6 would do on a extended low bass box. So let's go for extended bass here. Okay, and plot. This does a 2 cubic foot box, and with an F3 of 47 Hertz. The tuning frequency is 39 there. I wonder if I make the vent a little bit bigger, if that helps. That does help a little bit. The length doesn't have to be that much different either. So let's go for a 4-inch vent on this one, and let's plot this and see what this looks like. Okay, so as you can see, it's not quite as peaky, it's more flat, and we have lower frequency roll off there. Let's go to cone displacement. So now I can actually start to play 10, 20, 30, 37 Hertz is where it starts losing its X max, but I can go into X mech. So let's just clear all these graphs and let's do a box that I want to tune it somewhere around about 32 Hertz, and let's get a vent. Yeah, 4-inch vent sounds about right in there, and actually the box size is about right again. So let's plot this. We're looking at reasonable droppage there, 1 to 30 Hertz, still within the X max. Like I say, these woofers they have a higher FS, so they're not going to drop particularly low. If I add the cabin gain of a car on here, we can see that we actually still do get a reasonable response. What's that, 10, 20, 28 Hertz is looking fine. So if we were to put this in an enclosure in a car, we'd actually get a pretty nice flattish response with a little peak there at 30 Hertz, which is kind of what you want. So overall, not too bad at all. They're definitely much better 8-inch woofers to use for dropping low in a car application, but this seems to actually play pretty flat, and you know, the phasing and the group delay is not too a little bit bad there on the peak. I was going to say it's not too bad. Yeah, I'm quite impressed. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that little blast from the past video. A little bit of TS parameter stuff on there and seeing what these different woofers came out at. I'm going to be doing some show off videos of these lovely new digital designs I've got down here, a couple that I pieced together recently. I'm going to do some free excursion, look very nice, and I'm also going to do a good detailed explanation video of TS parameters and what they mean and how you can use them for people getting into audio and looking to learn a little bit more. They're very useful and it can be good fun.